Hey guys, today's topic, the Nikon Z50. Why we don't hate it. A couple announcements first. One, we have a number of product reviews coming up that we're in some stage of working on. Some we're just starting with, some we're almost ready to record and post the review. I'm going to flash those items up on the screen. Maybe some of the items appeal to you and you have questions about them. Ask them down in the comments. We always try with reviews to not only tell you what we think, but also the things that you want to know about those items. There's a couple really cool items up there, like that Sony camera that we're working on, and of course, some other items as well. Number two, Member Monday this week. We posted, when did we post it? Last week, late last week, we posted a highlight video of our Yellowknife tour. There's been questions both on the tour and after the tour about how we do our time lapses. There's a bunch of different ways to do it, but with the Yellowknife trip, I wanted to work very quickly. So I'd like to say I came up with a process, but let's say I used a process that works very well. And I'm going to show that off in Member Monday today. If you're not a member, there's that join button down below this video. You can check out today's video and much, much more member exclusive content that we've posted over the years. Now, today's topic, the Z50, it was announced last week, and I'm worried with the Z50, we're looking at another soap opera.
You are not going to treat him like this.
Stop. You're hurting me. No one has the camera yet, and I'm already seeing love and hate and everything in between online. So we've got our own opinions. Leigh's actually in a different city today. She's been busy like crazy. She was just overseas. She'll be talking more about that very soon. She's also going to chime in this video as well with her thoughts on the Z50. We've had to develop our thoughts independently, and they might not match up. We'll see. By now, you probably already know about Nikon's Z6 and Z7 mirrorless full frame interchangeable lens cameras. It's Nikon's first serious effort into mirrorless. We could call the Nikon 1 series serious, but that was an old 1-inch sensor and not of the same caliber as Nikon's flagship DSLR bodies typically have been. Now they're trying to change the game for themselves by getting into full frame mirrorless with the Z system with a whole new mount as well, F-mount compatibility through an adapter. Now the Z50 has been announced. Frankly, Leigh and I don't mind it one bit. Like I said, she'll chime in. Now, looking ahead to the Z50, let's look back for a moment with the Z6 and the Z7. They're certainly not without criticism. Sony in particular has been innovating in mirrorless in their third and fourth generation of mirrorless now, while Nikon and some of the others were still pushing DSLRs. That's their prerogative. That's cool. That's fine. Whatever they want to do. It is a fair statement to say in the mirrorless world, Nikon, Canon are playing catch up. It would be, on the one hand, easy to be disappointed. On another hand, I'm glad that they're doing it and moving ahead, and including the Z50 now, which is cropped sensor. Now, did we personally realize, Leigh and I, that there was going to be cropped sensor Z system bodies? No, but here we are, and the Z50 has been announced, and there's a lot to like. There's certainly some criticisms you can make, but let's dig in and talk about it a little bit. Number one, it's the same mount. Just like with the F mount, FX and DX, the same mount, the Z mount, FX and DX are the same mount. The sensor in the Z50 is going to be that DX or aps-c sized sensor. It's smaller on the same size mount. It means you'll be able to use the lenses interchangeably. You can put an FX lens on it. You could put a DX lens on the Z50, either native Z mount or adapted F mount. That's some pretty good flexibility. I like it. The Z50 is about a 21 megapixel camera. The Z7 has a lot more pixels. With a DX crop on a Z7, you'll have roughly the same resolution as a Z50. That's not bad. Yes, you have less resolution and a smaller sensor on a Z50, but you've got a very similar pixel density. That's where things get very interesting from a telephoto, sports, wildlife perspective. You're not compromising the amount of information that you have at those telephoto distances. Yes, you won't have as wide a shot on the Z50 for that sweet spot though, for wildlife where you might be cropping. You've got the same pixel density as the Z7. That's not to be ignored. That's actually pretty significant in my mind. It's much better than, say, compared to using the Z6 in a DX crop, which is about 10 megapixels. It certainly can be done, but all other things the same, I'll take more pixels when I can get them. So the Z50 delivers in that capacity. It's very similar resolution to the D500 and a lot of the other DX cameras that range between 20 and 24 megapixels. So I'm happy to see it. I'm happy with the resolution that's in the D50, especially at the price point. Another area where I see a lot of potential with the Z50 is the size. It's smaller than the Z6 and the Z7. The 6 and 7 have the same form factor. The Z50 is smaller than that. 11 frames per second with full autofocus in a compact body. That's where things get really interesting. Mirrorless is already fairly compact compared to DSLRs, and the Z50 is more compact than Nikon's other Z series mirrorless offerings.
When I first heard that Nikon was announcing something new for the Z series, I was super duper excited. And then when I found out it was a DX or aps-c sensor body and lenses, I was deflated because I didn't think I'd be interested. But then as I heard about this body and these lenses, I actually got quite a bit more interested in it. So I've taken some notes down here and I'm going to quickly go through why I became interested in this DX body and why I think that it was actually a good idea for Nikon to introduce it. One of the first things that struck me is that some of my most popular review videos have been entry-level cameras, like the Canon SL2 or the Nikon P1000. These are videos that I did quite some time ago, sometimes years ago, and they're still getting a lot of traffic. So I know that there are a lot of folks out there that are interested in entry-level cameras. Also, this thing is so darn small. The camera body itself is barely taller than this, the giant Z mount. So having a small setup and the lenses that go along with it are very small. Having a small setup makes it easier for me to take this camera out into the field. And if I'm doing an adventure, anything, it's nice to have a small setup. Also, the specifications are good. It has the sensor's nearly 21 megapixels. That's plenty good for most things. It will shoot up to 11 frames per second with auto exposure and autofocus, which is darn quick. And then the camera body itself seems very usable. So it has function buttons. It also has both a front and rear command dial. And it has a touch screen, which I have not been into a touch screen on my camera until recently. I've started using it a little bit more, and I kind of like it. So easy to control the camera means that I would like to use it more. Also, the controls are similar to the Z6 and Z7, which I have. It's easy to switch back and forth between cameras in that case, so that's nice. Also, this camera does 4K video at up to 30 frames per second, which is how I shoot. It has a mic input, which is handy when I'm in the field. And then the screen, the LCD screen on the back flips all the way down. If the camera's on a tripod, that really doesn't do me any good. However, if I'm going to handhold the camera to shoot video or take a photo of myself, that's pretty good. Now, it also has a pop-up flash, which I just love pop-up flashes. I think it's really nice to have, even though I don't use it very often. Just every once in a while, you might need a little bit of flash, and you've got it. And then also weather sealing. I was really glad to hear that the camera is pretty well weather sealed. It's not as good as the Z6 and Z7. I mean, there's a pop-up flash on top, but having a decent amount of weather sealing is going to allow me to bring this thing out into the field. There are a few things that I will be really interested to see when I'm able to get my hands on this Z50. And these things are, is the VR in the DX lenses, vibration reduction, image stabilization in the lens, is that going to be enough to overcome a lack of in-body image stabilization if I'm going to be shooting handheld video. We'll see. When I used the Sony Alpha 6400, which does not have in-body image stabilization, I used some Sony lenses with it that did have stabilization, and I did find that that was enough. So we'll see what Nikon comes up with in that regard. Also, is the camera really quick? So 11 frames per second is really good, especially with autofocus and auto exposure. But what is the buffer like, and how quick is autofocus and really those frames per second when I want to use autofocus tracking? That's something I'll be interested to check out. And then I'm really curious what the quality is on these DX lenses. I was told that they are going to be very high quality. The sample photos that we were provided look really good, but I want to get it in my hands. I want to take the photos, and I want to see what the quality is like. So that's it, everybody. That's all for my thoughts on this new Z50, and I'm interested to get my hands on it.
The most important things that Leigh and I always talk about are timing, light, and location. Those aren't tied to a particular camera. But if this camera, and we haven't not used one yet, but if this Z50 is nice and compact and has that kind of speed and sort of has its own flow, which makes it very easy to pick up and start taking pictures with, if it's very responsive, that would be a lot to like for us in this camera, is getting out with it in a small, lightweight package, not worrying about whether it's DX or FX, just focusing on the image quality and what we can do with it. That's a pretty good package altogether. Like I said, there's a lot we don't know yet. If it doesn't feel right, if it seems to be slower and doesn't get you in that rhythm like we've been able to get with the Z6 and the Z7, then I start liking it a little bit less. But again, no one's used one. We certainly haven't. Leigh and I seem to be ready to give the Z50 a shot, either by borrowing or renting one, or maybe even purchasing. We're pretty excited about it overall. There's a couple criticisms you could make, but you've also got to think of the price point as well. Number one, it doesn't have in-body image stabilization. If you want that, look at the Z6 and the Z7. It uses a different battery than the 6 and 7 and the D500 and the D810, and even our V1s use the same battery, or at least are compatible with the same battery format. The Z50 has a different battery. And that's not a deal breaker for us. A good camera is a good camera, but it sure would be nice to be able to put like a Z7 and a Z50 in a bag for the weekend, have one battery charger and a whole mess of batteries in there that just work between the different cameras. You can always borrow one, from the person who's using the other camera. That won't be the case here. We'll have to maintain dedicated batteries when using a Z50. Again, if we wanted the same battery, we'd want another Z6 or Z7, and same with the in-body image stabilization. Okay, now it's your turn. Now, we don't have the Z50 yet. You don't either, I don't think. But based on what you've heard so far and what you've seen, do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you like it as a friend? Would it be a nice acquaintance? If you don't like it, or if you think maybe it's a missed opportunity, relative to the price point, you've always got to keep that in mind. What would you do different? How would you value engineer this camera to have some more of the things that you'd want it or expect it to have while keeping it as a reasonable price? In other words, we could throw a lot into it, but it would be a very expensive camera. Nikon has different markets and different segments within those markets to serve, so they've got to be considerate of what they put in the different models and how they position them and how they price them. Okay, thanks for watching. Remember, those items that we showed you before that we're reviewing, ask any questions about them. Members, check out Member Monday this week, where I talk in more detail about my very quick time-lapse process that we've leaned on heavily after the Yellowknife trip, actually during and after the Yellowknife trip. Much more coming up on the Z system. We can't ignore it. In fact, one item that we're testing right now that we'll be reviewing that you saw is the 85mm f1.8 Z lens. I'm filming this video with this lens. I'm using the face detection. Hopefully that worked very well the whole time. And I'm at f1.8. I'm no beauty, but this will give you an idea of what it's like to shoot video at f1.8 with that 85mm portrait lens. Anything else you want to talk about? There's those comments down below. Thanks everybody. And for members, I'll see you over on the other side on Member Monday.